place is here, the time is now, and the journey into the shadows we're about to hear could be our journey. Because up there in the vastness of space, in the void that is sky, up there is an enemy known as isolation. It sits there in the stars waiting with the patience of eons, forever waiting, in the Twilight Zone.
Welcome back to Deja Vu. Today we are going to get into the Twilight Zone. I've been wanting to get into this for a little while, just been kind of waiting to take the leap. However, we're going to be going into the original series here. So today we're going to cover Season 1, Episode 1, Where is Everybody? It debuted October 2nd, 1959. It was written by Rod Serling, and it was directed by Robert Stevens. As far as cast goes, we are mainly going to see Earl Holliman in this. He plays Mike Ferris. Also in this episode is James Gregory as an Air Force general and Paul Langdon as a doctor. Without further ado, let's get into the synopsis so we can refresh our memory on what happens here. And hopefully you watch this episode outside of this channel as well, just so you can kind of be on the same page. A man stumbles along a desolate dirt road, the weight of emptiness pressing in. He has no memory of who he is or how he came to be there. His identity shrouded in a haze. The road leads him to a diner, where the shrill wail of a jukebox fills the still air. Inside, there are no faces, no voices, just eerie evidence of life paused. A pot of coffee simmers on the stove, pies cool on the counter, but the absence of any living soul gnaws at him. When he accidentally shatters a clock, the jukebox falls silent, leaving only the thundering of its pulse in the void. Seeking solace, the man ventures into a nearby town. It is lifeless, like a stage set abandoned by its players. A parked truck catches his eye. Inside, a woman's form slumps in the passenger seat. Relief turns to dread, though, when she is revealed to be nothing more than a mannequin. Her painted smile mocking him, the feeling of being watched crawls over him, unseen eyes lurking in the shadows. When a telephone suddenly rings in a nearby booth, he snatches the receiver, desperate for human contact, but the line is empty, a mechanical voice answering his pleas. In the police station, a cigar smolders in the ashtray. He calls out on the radio, but his voice echoes back unanswered. As he explores the cells, signs of recent life, a razor, faint scent of aftershave, taunt him. Reality twists as he stumbles into a soda shop, its shelves stocked with books titled The Last Man on Earth. He spins one rack, but it won't stop turning, the incessant motion fraying his mind. Terror takes hold and he flees into the growing shadows. As darkness falls, a movie theater marquee blinks to life, casting its glow over the empty streets. Drawn inside, the man finds a film playing, a strange reflection of his own past. Panic surges and he runs into the projection booth, but it too is empty. His own reflection confronts him in a mirror, distorted and surreal. Consumed by fear, he crashes into the streets, desperately hammering a walk button, screaming for salvation. Suddenly, the truth pierces through the fabric of his nightmare. The man, Sergeant Mike Ferris, is not in a deserted town, but in a sterile isolation booth, his every movement scrutinized by watchful eyes. He has been the subject of an experiment, his psyche tested to the brink, in preparation for the loneliness of space travel. The hallucinations, the emptiness, the terror, all a product of 484 hours in a sensory deprivation. As Ferris is carried out of the booth, his gaze drifts skyward. The moon looms above, silent and cold. "Don't go away up there," he whispers, his voice hollow. "We'll be up there in a little while." The isolation he escaped was only a rehearsal for the true void that awaits. What a really good opening episode for a show. I can only imagine, kind of wish that I could have watched this the first time on TV back then. It had to have some people really psyched for this. And not only that, there is something very special, at least to me, about black and white television. It just has a feel to it that color doesn't seem to match nowadays. This episode has one hell of a tone to it. It is, while it starts off as a confusing dream per se, it very quickly develops into what seems like a nightmare. You really feel for the character here as he is just racking his brain trying to figure out what is going on. And the interesting part I thought about this was that as he is having this hallucination, his brain, instead of giving him what he wants, a dream full of people and family or whoever it is, but somebody to interact with, instead of giving him that, it just gives him a reflection of what's going on, keeping him in this loneliness that he's trying to get out of. And that's why I can see why he would be so frustrated as the dream is going on, as he's becoming more desperate for attention or for interaction with somebody, and his own brain won't even give him relief from that by just giving him a dream or I guess you could say, a hallucination that at least accompanies somebody else. The only other living creature that I saw in this episode with him until he wakes up is a fly that was on the door of the car when he was by the mannequin, which is kind of funny. And it's funny because as this is going on, he knew at the very beginning what was going on. He knew because he said, I'm going to wake up any minute now. This was right in the beginning. He knew something fishy was going on, but he just couldn't pull himself out of it. Even with all of the weird signs that are going on, that there should have been people there with him. The phone calls that were happening, the smoking cigar, the running sink, the movie turning on by itself. So he knew at the very beginning, I'm going to wake up from this at any minute, but that minute just couldn't come along fast enough for him. To the point to where about the 9-minute mark in the episode, things are getting very serious for him because he is, at that point, he's very concerned that, if this is not a dream, if this is not a nightmare, why is there nobody in this town? Some interesting notes about this episode. So granted, we have to remember that this was made in 1959. Money was worth a little bit more back then as far as the dollar goes. So they shot this really fast in 9 days, edited it in 3, but the budget for this ended up being $75,000. That is a lot of money for a show back then. If I found the right calculator online, the amount of money that would be nowadays is about 800 grand. So 800 grand nowadays to spend on one episode. And this is an episode not like a lot of stuff today where we have a lot of graphics and computer animation going on. This is a pretty plain set. It's kind of more of a side note because this is the first episode of the Twilight Zone. But it's interesting to know that, we all think of, or at least I do, think of Rod Serling when I think of the Twilight Zone because of his narration that happens in the beginning and the end of the episodes. But what we find out when you're doing a little bit of background on here is that he wasn't the first one that they had selected for it. In fact, he was like third down the line or second down the line. I think it was third. And he just happened to get into it because the other people were unavailable or they couldn't afford them or they ended up not liking them. But it's funny how that worked out because he ended up being perfect. Now, when you get a chance to watch this, pay attention to the scene where he's in the jail. As he escapes from the cell when it almost shuts on him, he goes running by and he reaches with his right hand and he grabs onto the outside of a cell as he's running out of there. And you will see it. I mean, it looked like it didn't have much holding it. It wouldn't have taken much for him to have knocked that sucker in. Not really anything that pertains to the story, but it's just kind of funny to see that set may have been thrown together a little quickly, especially for a $75,000 budget. Now, as far as favorite scenes go, I do have a favorite scene in here. At about the 18-minute mark, things are really hitting the fan for him. You can tell that he is really at that point where he's about to snap. And as he's running down the stairs, he's over in the movie theater, he smashes into the mirror, and it's just a perfect scene. It really kind of shocks you. I knew it was coming, and even though I just kind of like let myself get into it, and it almost kind of scared me again when he shatters that glass. Let's go ahead and give it a watch real quick. Now, along with having a favorite scene, I do have one that is my least favorite. And to be honest, I just feel like if we were going to pick one scene that really just didn't even belong, or needed to be rewritten, it would be this one. At about 20 minutes and 20 seconds, they're taking him out of the isolation booth or pod, whatever you want to call it. And the soldier who's with the colonel, he tells the colonel, "Watch out, Colonel! Don't cut him on the glass that's broken on the clock." And the colonel is just kind of like, "Yeah, I know, stupid." Like, he doesn't say that exactly, but that's definitely the tone that you get from him. It was very easy to see that glass was broken. His hand was beating against it. And it was so blatantly in your face and obvious that even they would have been able to see it, that it was just kind of like, okay, come on. Did you really have to say that part? It's almost like they said it just to say something in that scene. For me, it almost kind of broke the feeling that you had along the whole episode, the tension and all of that. It kind of broke the mood, I guess you could say. Almost shook you out of it. When he was coming out of that pod and they kind of talked to him a little bit, asked him about what he saw, I thought it was very telling when he said he was at a place or saw a place that he never wanted to go back to, a place without people. That's really something to think about, because even if you are a loner, it seems to be that there's a message in here that you need some interaction at some level or you're going to go crazy. I know that there are some people who say that they want a cabin out in the woods by themselves with nobody there, and there probably are people that can get away with that. But I don't think that that's the rule. I think that's the exception. They talk here of the need for man to have companionship, and this is a prime example of it, because you will go crazy. And even aside from just companionship, there's something about touch of another human being that is needed as well. They don't really go into that as much here, but it kind of made me think of the experiments that you heard about the Nazis doing with a set of twins, where they had one that they would treat as a normal baby. They would raise that baby just like you would any other kid. The other child they raise by sticking their arms through these gloves that are built into like a containment area. And so they never physically touch the kid. And as far as I've understood, the other baby died from not having physical touch. So physical touch, being around people, it seems to be something that's required for us, even if we might not be the fondest of it, I suppose. I'd like to continue the scoring system that I use on the Andy Griffith Show episodes. So if we were going to have a Mayberry After Midnight score here, 1 through 5, 1 being I turn the channel off if it's on, 5 being it's a perfect episode, I'm going to give this a 3. I seem to give a lot of 3s out, but I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's I wouldn't even say it's okay. It's a good episode. It's just not something that I'd want to watch all the time. I Due to just the nature of what it is, I don't find the topic extremely intriguing, though it is fun to watch every once in a while. What score would you give this episode, and what is your favorite scene or least favorite scene in this show? Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again on Deja Vu. Have a great day.